the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden.
I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And we're joined by Molly Jong-Fast, editor-at-large for the Daily Beast. We had originally thought to have monthly cocktail parties, but I think we're going to just have to have weekly cocktail parties to get through this pandemic together, because otherwise Christina and I are just going to start talking about what we did that we're still in our pajamas, that we haven't left the house. So at least
we're going feral.
And we're going feral.
So this means we dress up, we make an effort.
Yeah, I've got makeup on. I put a blouse on. I am wearing pants. I just, can't see, but I am. And Molly, you're in your bed. You have just given up.
I know. I'm wearing clothes.
Cute though.
I'm wearing clothing, but I have to be in my bedroom because it's the only place where I have a lock on the door.
And you've got 3 feral children at home.
And if I don't lock the door, they'll just come in. One of the things, like the law of children, is if you're on the phone or doing something, they always come in to talk to you just at that moment.
Well, I think the people who are having the hardest time, besides the people who are sick and economically devastated, are people at home with young kids or teenagers.
Yeah.
Because you need breaks from one another. It's hard for them too.
I think it's worse for my kids, actually, because they're starting to get I'm just nagging them constantly, and you can tell they're starting to really resent me.
I was thinking, because you'd want everyone to pitch in, but of course they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be wanting to be on their iPads all the time. It'll be a tense situation. And I've read about families just going mad.
Yeah.
I need them. I have 7 people coming over to walk the dog because they want to get out of their houses.
Well, and you know that in China, in Wuhan, the divorce rate went up like some enormous quantity, like 20-30%, because you're trapped with someone.
Well, that's what we've said. Like, you're either going to come out of this in your relationship divorced or pregnant. Like 2 ways. But Molly, you look like my 18-year-old daughter in her Zoom classroom, because you're literally in your bed with pillows behind you. Yes. When I go into her room and she's doing her Zoom school, there's all these kids with pillows behind their heads. They're not even bothering to get out of bed at this point. Like the first day she went to her desk, and now she just sits in her bed with the dog. And
yeah, I think that's the thing is, it's so stressful for these kids. Like, imagine your life is normal. I think it's worse for them, because it's like, imagine one day your life is normal and the next day they're like, you can't leave the house. And I also think an added element of this that we don't talk about is most kids, like 99% of all children who get this won't die, right? It's a very small percentage that die. So, or that get very sick from it. So you have this terrible thing where you have parents who are in jeopardy, grandparents who are really in jeopardy, and then these kids who know that they're like almost protected. And I think that must be a very weird feeling.
They're going to hate us, especially the older grandparents.
Well, that's how it happened in Italy, right? You had these multi-generational families living on top of each other.
Right.
And the grandparents got it. You're in New York, Molly, and I can just say we have been quarantined. You were the last social gathering we had before quarantine. It was like March 9th. David was reminding me. And we came to New York and we were at your house and we were all like kind of comically elbow bumping, but you felt kind of self-conscious because it all seemed a bit weird.
Was that one of your dinner parties with conservatives and liberals?
Yes. And it was
Molly's famous for her dinner parties. She invites bipartisan parties.
But they're really, my conservatives are like David. They're not, they're more actual conservatives. They're not Trumpists.
Yeah. Well,
here where Kathy Griffin is coming on, and her mom, I don't know, she wasn't a Trump supporter, but she was a Fox News supporter and a Republican. We'll have to ask her about that.
Oh, yeah, she'll be.
Well, this is right. So we're bringing on comedian Kathy Griffin, and there's a backstory because probably really the only reason the only reason she's coming on is because Molly's on, and Molly's an old friend. And tell us, Molly, before she comes on, just give us a little background of how you met Kathy.
I met her through, oh, you know how I met her? Actually, it's a cool story. She gave me tickets to one of her shows. Like, I think she had some, like,
how did you find her?
From Twitter. I guess I followed her, she followed me, and then she gave me tickets to one of her shows. And it was, and I don't really like stand-up comedy is very difficult, you know, and sometimes it's not that funny. This was so funny.
He is so funny. No matter what anybody, I know some people don't like her politics.
Right.
It is hilarious.
And it was like a very tight show. Like, you weren't bored. Like, you were like, this is actually really, really good. And so then I didn't meet her because she went back to LA like the next day. And also she was, at that time, had crazy security, and you can talk to her about that, but she was in the midst of this maelstrom, which I think is a little better now.
Right. Post the famous photograph of the decapitated Trump head. But
since then we've been friends. I mean, and I really like her, and she's really like a very generous and nice friend, and quite smart, and just really nice. And so I try to come to LA a lot because my brothers both live there, and my father. And so whenever I go, I try to see her because I really like her. You know.
Well, we're going to talk to her about all kinds of things, not least because we love her outspokenness and bluntness, not least about Hollywood in the time of COVID and all these annoying celebrity things.
How hard it must be for them, you know, in the Hollywood Hills.
Well, not to get attention, I think, is the hardest thing for them right now.
You know what's interesting about California? Just the last time not the last time, but the time in October when I was there, they've had, I don't think COVID is as bad there as it is here at all. I mean, we have much, much more, but they had these like insane forest fires where they closed all the streets and like you couldn't go anywhere.
That's true. But they're always having some biblical problem, like with mudslides.
Forest fires, mudslides. I'm from
drought
in LA, and lived in Topanga Canyon. My parents were there for many years. Mudslides, roads would close and not open for 3 years. You know,
droughts,
and
earthquakes.
Locusts. Firstborn.
Manson family.
Okay. Let's bring Kathy on. But before we do, let's take a quick word from our sponsor. Well, everybody now seems to be running their business from home, and if you're trying to deal with HR issues, that can be a nightmare, but Bambee, that's Bambee, is here to help you.
And when running a business, you know that your HR situation can kill you.
And wrongful termination suits, minimum wage requirements, labor regulations.
And HR manager salaries, they aren't cheap. An average of, $70,000 a year.
Bambee was created specifically for small business.
You can get a dedicated HR manager. Craft an HR policy, and maintain your compliance, all for just $99 a month.
With Bambee, you can change HR from your biggest liability to your biggest strength.
Your dedicated HR manager is available by phone, email, and real chat.
From onboarding to terminations, they customize your policies to fit your business and help you manage your employees day to day, all for just $99 a month.
Month to month, no hidden fees, cancel anytime.
You didn't start your business because you wanted to spend time on HR compliance.
So let Bambee help. Get your free HR audit today.
Go to Bambee.com/FEM, F-E-M, right now to schedule your free HR audit.
That's Bambee.com/FEM.
Spelled B-A-M to the BEE.com/FEM.
There's people that exist. Hi, people. It's me in person.
Kathy, welcome to the Femsplainers. It's so great to have you, and also, as you say, it's just great to interact with people.
Are you guys algorithms? Just tell me.
No.
Did Molly say, that's Molly's hologram, you guys.
Nobody would make an algorithm like
Nobody would have holograms with ribs like this.
Nobody would have
All right.
programs.
How does this work? When do I shut up and when do I talk?
Kathy, the Darwin is obsessed with you.
Look, I have been telepathically sending him messages. He is already working diligently for, he's actually tracking down Stacey Abrams and Elizabeth Warren at the same time to see who really wants to be the vice, the real president.
He told me.
I tasked him with that one simple thing.
We left her house and he goes, Mom, Kathy's house is really nice. And he goes, Kathy's husband he's really handsome.
Yeah, he's handsome. And also, my house is the fanciest house he's ever seen in his life. And you know a lot of rich people. Hi, girls.
He was so
who owned the house before you bought it?
Oh, this is the best part. They actually made a documentary about it on Netflix called Sour Grapes, and it was in an episode of American Greed. So the guy who built this house, who never lived in it, is in jail now. He's the biggest wine frauder in history.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a guy named Rudy, and he and his mother, and I can't help it, I kind of like the mom. She really like the moo-moo. And they scammed all these like sommeliers and James Beard Award winners and stuff. And he finally went to prison, and they made a film about how these like super high and mighty sommeliers from the biggest restaurants around the world. And this was going to be his like wine crime house. And so the funny thing is, I've never had a drink in my life. And I have more professional wine storage. I have a wine cellar that's for 1,000 bottles. Then he hid other like up to regulation wine. I have like 4 wine refrigerators that aren't even the wine cellar, which is bigger than my first apartment. That I
Wait, what is a wine crime? Like,
you sell,
honey, you do not mess with, it's like the truffle world. Like you do not mess with like fake super fancy wine. And I, being the child of an alcoholic, it was Franzia across the board and $2 Chuck. But apparently in the real wine world, those people get very upset when some guy named Rudy siphons a label off an expensive bottle, gives it to his mom. She goes into the bathroom in Bell, California, comes out with some new wine, and they're paying like $5,000 a bottle. He's on he's also on a staycation. But he's isolated.
You don't still live next to the Kardashians, right? Or did you move from the Kardashians?
That's a little hard for me because I feel abandoned by Kanye. Kim and I still text, but
you shared a backyard, or almost. You had a wall.
Oh no, Molly was here. Like it was. I can't. Like you could see that in my arm. Like that's almost how close the house is now. It was hysterical. So yes, within arm's reach of the Kardashians, it was literal for me.
It's true.
What about the royals? Are they anywhere near you? And are you?
No, can I tell you something? By the way, is this official or are we just shooting?
Can we start
Recording.
Oh, good. All right, I won't cuss, but I don't know the rules.
No, you can cuss.
It's fine.
Okay, well, I think, my humble opinion, being a shallow Hollywood person and literally living in Bel Air, that's how shallow I've gotten. It's Molly can't even look at me. Look at her.
I like it.
Are you texting Paul Krugman?
Oh my God, poor Paul Krugman.
Wait, do the girls not know about our crushes?
We love Paul Krugman.
He's cute, but I want to hear about the royals.
You don't want to hear about our 3-way with David Gergen?
Hey, can I just say, my husband David is related to Paul Krugman. David's related to Paul Krugman.
Really?
Oh God, a Canadian? He's a Canadian?
No, there's some cousin, there's some crossover. His grandparents went to Canada. Paul Krugman's parents went to New York, and they're cousins. There's some sort of cousin level.
Well, he has, what prize does he have, Molly? Like Pulitzer or Nobel or whatever?
Yeah, does he have a Nobel?
No, I think, I don't know. I would guess Pulitzer.
Pulitzer Prize.
Yawn. Anyway, he's got 1 Pulitzer. And when I met him at Molly's apartment, he said, but by the way, I told him to his face that he's on the scale. And I said, do you know you're on the scale? And he went, yes. And I went, come on, Kruggy. And then finally he giggled a little bit. But I believe his line was, I haven't been to the East Side in 17 years, or like something like so New Yorky that I was like, did you take an airplane? Oh my gosh. So you should know that Molly and I secretly have, like I would say you and I share in common, we have friends that people wouldn't think we're friends with.
True.
A little bit.
Right.
In a good way.
And odd crushes. Like everybody is now in love with Chris Cuomo. Like everybody. I know.
Don't get me started because I now live for that show. I'm not even kidding. So that show, I actually posted something today, and, we've been struggling obviously as a nation and my narrow profession, but how do you deal with comedy with all this? I mean, I personally am truly scared shitless. I am not one of these, let's have a baseball game tomorrow. I started, I took a screenshot of when I started following this on the Johns Hopkins map on January 28th. So, we've all known a pandemic was someday going to come. So I'm not sure why people are acting like it isn't what it is. So I'm of the school of, we just don't know anything yet. And so I actually am I'm very interested in watching the Cuomo show, but I have to say the dark, twisted side of myself, and I did post a clip of this today, I fall for it. I love the bit with he and his brother. Yeah. I love the idea that he's ill from a serious illness and the brother still like hits him because I think in this era of what is okay to laugh about regarding COVID and what isn't, that was the first thing that I was like, okay, I'm going to post this. And of course I got half hate comments anyway, but I think that because you can tell that relationship is real and they've been giving each other crap since they were, 2 years old or whatever. Yeah. I thought that's it. That's something that it's okay to laugh at the end, whenever they have their segment. But no, I'm obsessed with the family. Like I know the wife's name now and I know the kids' names.
Oh, I wrote to Christina.
What's going on?
Because she has COVID.
I know, but did you hear? Okay, is this true or rumor that he got into a verbal altercation with someone on Sunday on the front lawn?
No, he got into a verbal altercation with
a bicyclist, right?
I think the cyclist was on a fat tire bike, but the way he described it, it came out like he was calling the biker fat. And he said, like, the biker came up to him and said something about social distancing because he was out with his wife and thing. And he said he got really mad and told the guy,
my favorite.
And said, I only have to put up with this because I'm a celebrity. And then the biker went to the police station.
By the way, are there any secondaries and tertiaries on the story?
No, the biker told his side, and he said, basically, that I just said something and Chris Cuomo went ballistic. He does seem to have a bit of a temper, Chris Cuomo.
I love it. I'm also, go ahead, Mal.
Are they in the Hamptons?
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm fascinated by. First of all,
I'm not go anywhere.
But when they describe, and by the way, I don't think there are secondaries and tertiaries to the story. So I did see the local ABC News report, and I do know the guy made a police report, the cyclist. But what I keep picturing Chris Cuomo and two women, and the way I read it was they were standing on his front lawn. So maybe they were social distancing, but I keep picturing this weird like triangle of grown-ups, and I didn't know, like, were they just wanting some fresh air, and were they in a cluster? Was that why the guy yelled? Were they not in a cluster? But I do love the idea, and I know this is terrible, but I love the idea that Christopher Cuomo is now, he's like the new Kathy Griffin. You don't know what he's going to say on CNN any minute. I love it, and I love when he's foggy. He talked about the trances and seeing the old man who I loved at the head of his bed, and the brother's dressed as a ballerina. I live for that.
I loved it.
And the brother rolls with it, and he's like, he probably is calling the White House once an hour, as he should be.
Yeah.
So, all right, sorry. I got off track. Yes, I'm calling the Cuomos.
What's it like in Hollywood? Because we've all been amused by
the Imagine video.
Oh, okay. So Hollywood is if anyone is a friend of Bill W's, it turns out denial is a river in Egypt. It turns out the big book is wrong. I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to get in trouble for this. I personally feel like Hollywood is not quite there yet. The Elizabeth Kubler-Ross 7 stages of death. Yeah. I would say they're still in denial. And I admire their optimism. But I have heard rumblings from many, many friends in the industry that are seasoned professionals with like, we might have to promote the season. We might have to put off the season like 2 weeks now. Right? And I'm like, I don't think schools are opening till 2021, but so honestly, nobody knows what's happening. But to tell you the truth, at this moment, and it could change, it's kind of weird that people are acting like everything's normal.
Do you think, or you get this impression from Instagram that like celebrities are like trying to look like they're doing the right thing, but maybe it's also they just are like desperate for attention they're not getting?
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, let's cut the shit. It's so annoying. I think there's so much that we still have to learn, and because so many, unfortunately, as many people have been touched by COVID, not enough people have really seen enough of it to know like when it's sort of appropriate to do that stuff. And by the way, look who you're talking to. But what I mean is, for example, I wrote a thread about it yesterday, but my husband has one of his best friends, and he's a 40-year-old guy, and he's been on a ventilator for 2 weeks in a hospital in Florida. They had to have him, face down on the bed. They finally extubated him yesterday, and he panicked and he couldn't breathe, and they had to re-ventilate him. 40-year-old guy. So, we kind of feel like we're living that because Randy's on like a text chain, and we both kind of wake up if the phone goes off. And, I went to the hospital, and I don't think I could have survived without the hospital treatment that I got. And yet I didn't read, there were 3 testing requirements that the CDC didn't let me have. And yet when I was there, because the minute they looked at me, they put me right in the ER COVID isolation ward. So there's an ER isolation ward. I sent Molly a picture. There's like a room with like a like that. And then if you go full time, you go upstairs. And I think you then mandatorily have to be there 14 to 21 days. So what was interesting, and the reason I talked to the Los Angeles Times about it when it happened, is I want people to know, I wasn't trying to make a point that like even celebrities can't get a test. I was just making the point that when I even had a doctor say, you do have to, it's now time for you to go. First I went to urgent care. I was like, okay, this is maybe no big deal. But
you
then when
sorry, Kathy, you had like stomach issues. You'd come back from Mexico.
Yeah, I don't know if, once, of course I don't want to blame anything that happened in Mexico, but because I had traveled out of the country, a coterie of reasons, but mostly based on my symptoms. Severe, the body aches, the cramping pains felt like, fire. The vomiting was so intense, there was nothing left to vomit, but it was like my throat was spasming in an involuntary way. And
I had that.
Yeah, so I was like dehydrated, shivering. So the point is I had enough traits where the main doctor, and 2 of the nurses said, and they kept looking at the screen, and they kept going like this, like, the CDC, there's just 3 boxes we can't check. And it was really, I really felt like, but first, initially they said it. They said, well, let's test you right away. And then the guy even said, well, if your husband went to Mexico with you, why don't we at least give him a test now? We'll take you in. And he had to go home, of course. And then once we got in the room, I felt like they were really wanting to, it's a hospital. They want to test you and see what's going on. And then they specifically said the CDC guidelines, they're so restrictive. They can only give you a test when you're almost like my husband's friend, who's, he pretty much almost couldn't breathe.
Is he doing okay?
You know how it is he's been in ICU for 3 weeks, on the vent for 2 weeks, tried to take it off.
That's not good.
Extubated him, then re-intubated him today. We're very scared. And so what I'm learning, and I kind of wanted to ask you ladies in your experience, I'm kind of learning that there's kind of 2 sets of my pals. There's someone who is really personally being touched by it. Molly is one of them, meaning she's expressing like, what do you mean you're going to open up the country? Here's a million pieces of data to show why. And then I find that in my own experience, there's kind of a whole separate other set of whatever folks I run across or talk to or virtually whatever, that if they haven't been affected by it yet, they tend to kind of, at this point, it could be different a week from now, 2 days from now, I would say that people in LA are still kind of acting like it's not happening for the most part.
Well, you don't have it.
In New York, it may have peaked because some of the most dire predictions never came true. They didn't have to fill the Javits Center.
But in New York, the thing about, even though the most dire, like those crazy predictions where you're going to need 80,000 ventilators or something, they didn't come true. But you do have, like, I talked to a friend of mine who's a doctor last night, and she was saying it's much better We don't have the bed checks where we find the dead people in the beds. Like, what we're looking like, it's much better, but it's still so bad here.
Well,
like,
so here's my question for the group, if you don't mind. I'm totally ruining my role, and I apologize. I'm being a bad guest, but I think that there's something just odd. And yet I'm afraid to even say it on Twitter because I'll get in trouble. But I'm 59 years old. I can never remember a time where, the government, my own personal physician, hospitals, we hear it on the news, we read in the news every day, saying to Americans, every single one of them, you have to be this sick before you even think about coming to an ER.
Right.
I mean, it's always been the opposite. If you get people earlier on in their sickness, you're going to have a lot less people in the ER, et cetera. So right. I'm wondering, what do you guys think it'll take for hospitals to be able to say to people, hey, if you guys can come in sooner, we're going to be able to save a lot more of you?
Well, I think the fundamental problem, I think the fundamental problem is they don't know how to treat this. So what
like the medical staff?
Right. I mean, there aren't a lot of, there's not a proven therapeutic. Everything is experimental. So they can't even give it to you until you're so sick that there are no other choices.
Yeah.
So if you get a person who might end up having a mild case in there and you try to give them something that could cause heart murmurs or heart attack, you are legally like in so much trouble. So I think that's why they just don't want you to come in and also because everything's so overwhelmed.
Well, also, Kathy, to your point, what makes this crazy is that it's been mostly spread by people who don't show symptoms.
Right.
Right. So we all feel guilty and fearful at the same time. I don't want to give it to anybody,
Kathy, do you go out of your house at all?
No. I haven't been out of the house since the hospital, which was March 23rd.
Do you have people that come into the house?
No. It's been, we have myself, my husband, and we have a housemate. And so we've made sort of our own little isolation house, but that was kind of the deal. Nobody
you have to do your own house cleaning and everything.
Yep.
Oh my God.
I know. Basically, it's also until we know what's happening. Like, right. And the thing is, we are getting the flow of information is fast and furious.
Kathy, let me ask you this. So one of the things that has happened right now, which I find really, really weird, and you talk about LA being in maybe its own bubble, not really taking it seriously, but now we're seeing it becoming cultural warfare, weaponized, that, like, as we've seen in Lansing, Michigan, and I think there were two other states. Like now people are, right, and South Dakota, where they're saying, it's like to show your support for Trump, you show disdain at social distancing, and that social distancing and isolation is some, abridgment of freedom and your rights. And so now we're having, on top of everything else, a culture war.
Yeah.
Over whether you should. And I'm kind of curious.
My feeling is, if you can shelter in place, and I know that I'm reeking of white privilege, and I understand. What I get mad is the people that really totally can shelter in place, but they're antsy. You know what I mean? So let's say that we're doing everything that we can for the community and the country, and we're all working together, and eventually maybe all the governors will work together, and eventually maybe somebody on the cabinet will do the right thing. But until then, I just kind of feel like those kind of events, like the ones that happened yesterday in Michigan, where it looked like The Walking Dead there, I believe it was the Capitol. I kind of feel like shelter in place, and whatever that is, I want that. I just want to, frankly, like, that's got to work itself out amongst people who feel that way. Like, I don't mean to be doing the others, but I hear what you're saying, and I see those images on television, and read about it as well. But frankly, that makes me think, and you want to open a baseball game where some of the people in the audience feel the way I do, but some of the people in the audience feel the way they do because it's baseball. And so that's one of those things, frankly, that makes me more anxious. Mm-hmm. And so I am disappointed that we don't have more electeds or officials in any capacity, or frankly, people with legitimacy. Certainly not, I don't think celebrities would make the difference, but the more more people that can say, like, what I like is I watch Gavin Newsom's press conferences every day, and I watch Cuomo's, and I watch some other ones. But I really keep thinking of 2 days ago when Newsom said this thing. He said in a very human way, he goes, "Give me a few more weeks." And so that's the one I keep playing in my head. Like, it's so simple. I know it's so fundamental, but it's just lives are on the freaking line. And like I said, going through this really just via Randy, his friend it's so dire and bad.
Yeah, you don't want to get it. It's
as bad as it gets. And so,
although it's possible that a lot of people get it are asymptomatic. So that's another mystery.
But Garcetti said no sports until 2021 now with Bloomberg.
And but they've been playing a little game. I know that there's the East cluster and the West cluster now. There's a Midwest cluster, but I have a feeling they're simpatico, and I have a feeling they're almost tag teaming the warnings. I call it I have a bomb to drop, but I've been watching it. And so if Garcetti says we suggest you wear masks, then 24 hours from now he's going to say it's mandatory. So I think you're right. I think if Garcetti is the first one to even put it out there that there's no sports till 2021. He's getting people used to just the notion of that. And if you're someone like me who takes this very, very seriously, I find that comforting. We don't need sports to survive. They'll be there when this is over. They'll be there after a vaccine. So I'm nervous about other people. And I'm nervous about, I miss the days of, obviously, we were all around for the AIDS crisis, and we were so hungry for knowledge because our dear, dear friends were going in this vicious virus. So it reminds me a lot of that. I'm glad Dr. David Ho is working on it, who also worked on the AIDS vaccine. But remember, those first cocktails were really rough. So this notion that everyone's like, a vaccine could be 6 to 9 months. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I remember that in the AIDS crisis, there were these breakthroughs. We've got a cure. And then you would find that when they went through the controlled trials, it didn't work. So I've
been watching a lot of apocalyptic series, including Chernobyl, which Molly and Christina know. And I just feel like, as you say, Kathy, like they're getting us ready for, okay, no sports till 2021. We're not leaving our houses till 2021.
I hope.
We can be like 2 weeks from now. We'll be different. But I don't see how it's going to be different 2 weeks from now.
A friend of mine made a great point, and he said, here's what I don't get about all this talk about how to open what and in what order. No information has changed since the day we did any mitigations. Right. So from the day that we did the first mitigations, let's say that there were 2,500 cases in the country and somebody somewhere did a mild mitigation. From then until now, when we're talking about opening the country, nothing has changed. Right. There's not testing. The entire country, I believe, averages something really, really low. Like if you average out the number of tests per day and literally divide it by 50, it's 3,200. So imagine we're a country of 325 to 350 million people. Newsflash, you need 700 tests. Sorry, you need a test for everybody, and then you need that 4 weeks later one. Yeah. And then, the other antibody stuff, which now we're learning once again, day by day, like, oh, I thought this one might've been reliable. And then I saw another report where the person administering it only got negatives. So, it's changing so fast that if anything, that's what gives me anxiety. Like the virus is the virus, and it's brutal, and we don't know what it's going to be, but we kind of know there's this long thing that's really almost mythic in proportions. And we have always heard about pandemics. I mean, who are we kidding? Like we've always seen movies about it, read books about it, and history books. So this idea that we have no sources to turn to for how to behave, but more importantly, the idea that we have the actual examples of the other countries with free press or close to a free press, and we're not even following like their advice to a degree. That's what makes me uneasy. What about you guys?
How has it been for you? You must have had all sorts of things canceled. You have a calendar where you're booked every day and just gone. Were you like, I have less of a calendar, but I was relieved not to have to do all those things. I'm sort of personally happy to be at home and
You and Larry David.
Yeah.
I think Larry could be in isolation for 40 years and be very happy.
I think how has it been for you psychologically? someone who's sort of out there and, you know, a star. Now you're stranded at home. Is it?
Well, I will say, I mean, sort of, if you're going to think about the bigger picture of all of this, you know, I kind of have two ways of thinking this could go, and it's not going to be two ways. It could go anyway. But if we go the dystopian route, which is more likely, because as you know, this is the beginning of a typical authoritarian transition, et cetera, et cetera. Or I have the fantasy, which is the utopian vision, which is somehow at the end of this, it actually is the great leveler and it is the great humbler. And at the end of this, we are more, you know, we're less polluted because we had to force down things, but it gets us to, I mean, Molly knows this, I'm a big fan of old-fashioned Dorothy Parker style dinner parties, and I demand phones down because real live conversation.
Best dinner parties ever.
You know what, at the last one I had, 3 journalists, I caught them all running into the bathroom at one time because somebody let a scoop out.
Really?
Yeah.
From the party?
Yeah, somebody from the party had, like, I think it was like Maria Shriver, somebody let something like leak and it was really juicy. So like one by one, like I think it was Jim Laporta, like 3 journos, like Leopold, you know how he is.
Oh, I love him.
Well, you know, he's getting the scoop. So
I mean, as soon as life gets back to normal, the first trip, because my brother is having a baby, so as soon as in LA, so that's going to be my first trip is coming to.
All right, this is the worst question for, you know, I consider myself Jewish adjacent because Irish Catholic and Jewish are.
I can't believe you're not Jewish. That's the big mystery.
What?
You just, I see like a young Joan Rivers.
Oh, I got her painting right up there. This is my office. I call her the boss. Every day I come to my office and I say hi to the
You are
boss.
her rightful daughter.
Oh, I loved her. I think about her every day. I think about the fact that at this moment, Joan really would be the only person that could get away with certain things. And I do think that. And I do hear that from a lot of people. Like, there isn't a Joan or a Rickles at this moment. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there will be a time when we have that spectrum again from.
That could be you. That could be you, Kathy. It could be you.
Hey, it's my honor. My honor. I can't wait to get back on the road or do specials or, you know, do anything.
No, I listen to a lot of comedians, but for a long time I followed you, and you have that spark, and also just that you just can't help but say the wrong thing sometimes.
I know.
It's irresistibly great. Now tell us a little bit about, we won't go into it because, well, it's not as depressing as the pandemic, but in its way, you had this cataclysmic event where you were canceled, you made a joke, it went wrong, you apologized, but it wasn't enough. You had to be not just excoriated, eliminated. I mean, you were.
Well, actually, Donald Trump Jr.'s word is decimated. Our family wants to decimate Kathy Griffin, not just put her out of work.
Which also means he doesn't know what decimate means.
Oh, it's a lot of letters. No, he's pro-Mac. He's not even fully formed. I don't want to even insult Jane Goodall, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, in a way, I know it sounds hyperbolic, but I kind of feel like I lost 2 old lives. Like the Trump photo made me sort of lose my old life in a way that way. And then obviously the pandemic, we all feel like, I don't know, have you guys started having the like, what do you miss about your old life conversations?
Yeah.
Okay, I got to hear them.
I miss my clothes. I miss wearing, you know, clothes.
Right.
I miss shopping.
Is it the tactile part? Like, is it like, oh, I miss hugging my friends? Is it the leaving the house? Like, what do you?
No, it's this whole sense of, you know, if you're putting on something other than your sweat clothes, you have plans.
Right. Or you're out of your mind. You know, like I couldn't walk around I might be walking around in a ball gown in a week. I might just.
I mean, we could be like the British, you know, in the jungle. And every night they'll put on dinner jackets.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I think there's something to that you just don't let civilization go.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
It is hard, and we don't know it yet. And by the way, the whole celebrity thing, honestly, I love making fun of celebrities, but celebrities are humans and they vote. And I think, like, I'm not up on all this stuff because I'm a little more of a newsy person than a celebrity person these days, but I'm still both. But I think I think it's super cool. Like when Bocelli did that first video where he was on his balcony, like not even the big production one, but just him on his balcony, but just like, that was really cool. I think some, Chris Evans or somebody, like it was some big hot guy, action stars, like reading children's books or something like, like John Legend singing. Like, I think that stuff is all great. I do get what you're saying though. I guess what I struggle with, only because, like I said, I don't think enough people have been touched by it that will be, is sometimes it's a little hard to switch between, this is just me personally, like the world where, I'm watching Randy read one of his texts about his friend and I'm watching his face, and then I'm seeing like a video of somebody like dancing around, and I'm trying to reconcile that right now too, because I think people should go on Instagram and dance if they're fine, but we have to figure out a way to integrate all this stuff, and maybe something after all this is done is maybe somehow we do get more human, although we're going to be tracked. Let me tell you right now, we're going to be tracked.
Well, it's weird because, I think actually Chernobyl's an interesting comparison, is because it was an invisible radiation that people didn't really understand at the time. And then it had these devastating consequences. And what's weirder is, of course, we're way more comfortable than any occupant of Chernobyl under Soviet Russia. But you do, as you say, it's a double vision. On one hand, you've got this horror, and what is the death toll up to? Are we up to Vietnam yet? Almost, not quite. But
I think we're under 700,000 cases.
Right.
But that's only in the United States.
It's like 20,000
globally.
Yeah, but these are mounting tolls, and as you point out, they just seem kind of, for those of us who are not experiencing it immediately, it seems kind of remote. So it's a very weird moment, and I think even though the days become shapeless, I guess the more serious point about clothes is the weeks become shapeless. Like you don't say, oh well, next week I'm going to go downtown, or
the way we measure what we do in our day and how to think of what is definitely been thrown up. But what I like is maybe it will be good for us as a planet we definitely have to stop and think more. Like, even if you take this seriously, you're probably at least washing your hands a lot more. Like, so I think that will start to fold in. And I think that we'll start to think of ways to make that stuff interesting. Like, since we now get it, the government's not going to do their job, they're not going to help. The FDA actually loosened regulations and restrictions on possible vaccines as well as tests. So we're going to go through a period where they're not going to have the usual trial standards and stuff like that. But I also think the NGOs and what historically has happened throughout history when a government, any government, obviously the Soviet Union and our government behaving the way it is, unfortunately, I think we're all going to become community organizers. I have this feeling, not everybody, but I think we're going to find citizens becoming community organizers in a way that we're going to go either one way. We're either going to ignore them and say, they're full of it, they're drama queens, or we're going to be like, who else is a community organizer? Barack Obama. And I just have a feeling he would be handling this very, very differently.
Well, my joke with Chernobyl is the Soviets lied better. Like, give them that.
My joke is that I watched Chernobyl as a pick-me-up. I watched it as a pick-me-up after everything else. How are you guys dividing your consumption of COVID info versus completely non-COVID info or entertainment or anything?
Well, there's a podcast called This Week in Viruses. It's been going on for years, but it's state-of-the-art virology, and they all get together, and they are the problem solvers in this field. And so I listen to it obsessively.
Is it good?
Almost every day. It's so good. This Week in Viruses, TWIV.
So that's a lot. You're saying lot.
That's for viroholics. You may not be viroholics.
I'm a viroholic.
It is for you. In fact, you should write to them. They would have you on, because suddenly they're these nerds. They used to be the least popular people at parties.
So it's literally This Week in Virology?
This Week in Virology.
They're on the party list. They're on the party list.
I want to.
You will love them. I'm in love with both. Well, there's two guys. They're kind of grumpy, but they're fabulous. They were meant to.
Smart and grumpy. That's my favorite kind of man.
Yeah, Paul Krugman is very grumpy. I mean,
Paul Krugman is so grumpy and delicious. And all of your secret Republican friends that you're in love with, like Nick Kristof and David Fromm, and who have you been communicating with that you're a little embarrassed about? Come on, Jong-Fast, let's go.
Yeah, Jong-Fast.
He's like, I've been texting with Ava Braun, but you don't know her. She has a nice time.
Okay, I have a friend who's coming on the show next week, Dave Rubin, who is a podcaster from LA. I told him and a comedian, and I told him I were having you on. He was like, wow, that's it. But he wanted me to ask you if, having had your trauma with being canceled and, the worst case, like Twitter mobs, hate mail, death threats, did it make you more sympathetic to cancel people? Like,
Yeah, because I think there's a way to cancel that's humorous. Like, I was really good friends with Don Rickles and Joan Rivers. I mean, I was closer with Joan, but I knew them both very, very well. And obviously we would talk about this more than anything because they would talk about, feeling misunderstood really until their last days. And Don really hated when people would call him an insult comic. And he'd say, I put thought into these quips, or he's so brilliant and fast. They both were. So yeah, I think there are people getting canceled for the wrong reasons. I definitely, my situation was so unique. I don't even know what category to put myself in. And the fact that it's sort of still top of mind for people is definitely bizarre. But Jane Fonda already warned me this will be on my tombstone. So I'm just going with it. And look, I was thrilled to make an award-winning film. Molly did one of the Q&As as a great gift called Kathy Griffin, A Hell of a Story. And, it was great to be able to put that out last year and feel like I could put out something funny. And, I think, frankly, even the cancel culture is going to be interesting during COVID. Because think about it. You could have somebody going online. Maybe there's somebody already hassling a certain well-known person. Like this, this is not God help me if I jinx, but like Adam Schiff, right? So they're trying to cancel Adam Schiff, cancel. He's not getting canceled. But in this era, if you take, like, let's say even one of the Republicans that came down with COVID, it's like, yeah, I might want to make fun of Rand Paul for a lot of reasons. I kind of don't want to cancel him for COVID right now. So right. It's definitely, even the cancel culture, I think, is sort of taking a step back. Like, you got to give those Nazis credit. They waited until yesterday in the rain in Michigan to go with their gridlock Nazi AK-4. I'm not sure what that Walking Dead thing was, but
that was unbelievable, that march. And they hate Whitmer because
because she's trying to save their lives.
It's nuts.
I know.
No, we can't let her go before we talk about the Royals. Just a comment.
Okay, so here's my comment. I put some thought into this. All right, just my observation is I think that, what happened? Wait, I don't hear her.
Yeah, I don't hear Danielle.
She's sending me sign language and I don't get it.
Oh, can you not hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to do one, because I'm desperate for the Royals. I want to do one more cancel culture, because you said something interesting. And also, we're thinking once, this is like a kind of war that we're going through with COVID, that, cancel culture and something that you went through might seem now so comically quaint after this. But you did say cancel for the wrong reasons, and comedians have always been at the forefront of free speech and challenging. You've taken a strong stance against Louis C.K. Do you think there are right reasons to cancel? Do you think there's a way they can ever?
Yeah,
what's your take on that?
Yeah, I do think there are right reasons and wrong reasons. I also think it's obviously very subjective and very personal. And, it doesn't matter if you agree with me or not. And it's not going to affect Louis' career if he agrees with anything. But for me, I've known Louis off and on for many, many years. Not super, super well. Like, I have some other female comedians that were like good friends, and one of my girlfriends dated him and all this other stuff. But I've known him, that whole crowd, forever, and I've seen all their penises and
willingly? Willingly?
Do you guys not know male comics? Like, I can't think of a male comic who I haven't seen his dick. Like, I was actually doing a list in my head the other day, and I was going down the list. I was like, oh yeah, one time we're at a party, he pulled his dick out. Oh, one time he wrapped it around his finger and said, here, Kathy, have a pretzel. Like, it's just, I'm not making light of Me Too, but this is not new in comedy. I mean, it's just I think the thing that was the tipping point for me was when I read the New York Times article about the two women that at Aspen went to his room and, he exposed himself. And I think I remember going to the Aspen Comedy Festival and I was a young comedian, and trust me, if some famous guy would have said, hey, I'm having a bunch of people to my room, that's what the Aspen Comedy Festival is. It doesn't mean you want to be raped or anything. It's not unusual for females to go to the room of a male comic or producer or promoter because everybody else is there. That's how kind of we know each other, a lot of these festivals. So the thing that touched me the most about the Louis C.K. story was I couldn't let go of when the two women he had exposed himself to in that room decided to get out of comedy altogether. Yeah. And that's the thing is when people want to stick up for Louis and guys call me and why can't I get off his back? I'm not on his back. He crushed dreams, and as someone who believes to this day, women have to work 10 times harder and jump 10 times higher in stand-up comedy. It's still not that much different from when Joan was my age or even younger, frankly. And so to me, that's a different thing because I know that feeling. I can imagine being in that room, and I think one of them wanted to be a stand-up and one of them wanted to be a writer. And then they both just thought, I don't want anything to do with anything. And I thought, when you're a girl and you want to make your living in comedy, it's a calling. So that's the part, when you're crushing dreams, then I'm not gonna be in the bro club with that.
Yeah. Do you think he's been punished enough? I mean, he lost so much, and then he was.
But I think that Kat's idea that you can't go back to the careers that these women have lost is an interesting one.
That's what I'm saying. When I got a call from someone at Live Nation talking about bringing Louis back, I just went, well, why are you calling me? Why don't you call the two girls in the article, apologize, and then help them get their career started?
Well, I guess, is there an end of purgatory? Do you see an end for someone like him?
Well, that's a different thing because that's a habitual thing. And so, Louis to me is a specific case because when you're the guy who habitually does that particular thing, whether it's exposing yourself, my girlfriend he went out with, he would stand behind her and jerk off in a sock when she was on the computer, and she finally wrote about it. Because all these years she was like, is that weird? And I'd be like, I guess it's up to you. And she'd be like, well, we were dating. It would be weird, So now she was able to finally write an essay and be like, that was gross. And now I can finally say it was gross. Yeah. So I will say there are kind of many tiers. There's that tier, but then there's the tier of the executives and what I call the check signers. And there's the sexism and misogyny and ageism is so rampant there that we really somehow need more women to just step up. And, like I said, you got to jump higher and work harder. But until that happens, you're not going to see very much of the paradigm shift that needs to happen. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but right now there isn't one single female in all of entertainment in the United States who can greenlight a television show or a movie. Not one. Even Shonda Rhimes has to kick it up to Bob Iger. So no matter how, even Oprah has to run it by David Zaslav at Discovery, who bought OWN. So that's where I like to remind certainly younger comedians a lot. But remember, it's all about who's going to sign the check, because you can dazzle people all you want. And so if you're a female and you can be more of a self-starter, I think that's better. And I think it makes you better. And that's why I live in such a world where the guy comics already get such a pass. I mean, really, think about it. How many movies are there where it's 4 frumpy guys and you know who they are? They're all household names, and they've all been millionaires since they were, 22 or something. They've been on sitcoms and movies, and it's the 4 frumpy guys, and we don't know what to do with this baby. It's the 4 frumpy guys, and a hot girl moved into the dorm. It's the 4 frumpy guys, and we're retired, but we still like hot girls. Like, that's still the pitch that everybody wants. So,
and I hear from comedians that they can't go on campus, for example, if they don't toe the very, very strict PC line. There are these censorious little, like apparatchiks from the colleges. But that humor is now policed in ways.
That's the same though as the sexual assault stuff.
What?
No, I actually think that
I don't know that that's the same as the sexual assault stuff.
What about the sexual assault stuff? Because there are a lot of
Louis
number of wrongfully accused.
Right, but Louis C.K. is not being canceled for jokes. He's being canceled for all the sexual misconduct stuff for a serial sexual.
Here's what I don't get, and you will tell me where I'm wrong, but I think he wasn't their boss. He was a big comedian. They go to the party. They're comedians. They're all drunk. They're all, and at least he turns out to be kinky. That ends your career. That ends your career.
Yes, Danielle, it does.
Right,
Yes.
that was Christina.
I don't know who you are. Yes.
It does.
You told me.
You have to know, if a woman behaved a tenth of the way all these guys do, it would be over. I mean, look at me at CNN. I got fired for a photo that was completely covered by the First Amendment, and the broadcast, it was only one night a year. Thank you. It was only one night a year, but it always did very well for them. And, you know, if I was a guy, I don't think that would have ever happened. And so
I think you can't, there's sexual assault, which is what Louis C.K. did. And
wait. Why do you call that sexual assault? He asked him if it was okay.
Well, I don't know about all of them. Remember, only a few women came forward. I'm just telling you, I know this culture very, very well. And you're not going to get very many women to come forward the way that they did. It also, as you know, took them a long time. It's still very much the environment that if you're a female and I'm just being specific to stand-up comedy, so sorry I'm being so narrow, but if you're a female and you open your mouth like me, I mean, that's all I do is pay the price for sticking to my guns about things like Louis. Yeah, that's sexual assault because you know, I don't whip out my vulva or my clitoris to any young male comics and ruin their dreams because it has nothing to do with comedy. But to your point about college audiences being triggered, that is a totally separate issue. And I do agree that there has to be sort of a reckoning about like what is truly triggering, because like I always say, I want my audiences to be laughing or maybe shocked. I don't want anyone to really be like leaving crying. So people have to understand you can still make fun of people, make fun of yourself, make fun of others, and nobody cries. But that is a whole other world. I don't want to see anybody's dick anymore. I have been on sets my entire career where the camera guy literally rubbed his dick on my ass and like thought it was funny. And then the other 5 guys laughed too. And I was 27. And I was from Oak Park, Illinois.
And I also think you're in a position where you can't say, like if she had said, don't rub your dick on me, she would have lost her job. And I think
even if I had like gone to HR, like by the way, I've tried everything. And now in my case is frankly more of a Time's Up situation than a Me Too. So I have sort of suffered the, the brunt of like just stuff guys have said to my face that I know they just wouldn't say to a guy with my accomplishments or my hardware or whatever. That is a different animal. But I do think it's good that even in our wacky comedy field, it's good that these guys got exposed. I mean, I think some of the guys that I've known for years, I do think they're being a little more careful. And I think
it's certainly a good thing. I agree that we don't want to put up with this shit and let them go.
Louis is not the hill you want to die on. I just want to say that. Louis is not the hill you want to die on.
Yeah.
But also, and Louis really has a serial, I mean, like Harvey, a kind of serial, hundreds of women. And
he loves Woody, and he's like, he and Woody are like, they have that same thing where,
Woody Allen. Wait, that accusation of child abuse.
Wait, Woody Allen is friends with Louis C.K.?
Oh, yeah.
All makes sense.
I think Louis was in Blue Jasmine. I think he put Louis in maybe 2 movies, but I'm almost sure.
The thing with Louis C.K. that I always wondered was like, I was always like, he's just not very funny. Like,
wait a minute.
The bros love him. Like he kind of has that Chris D'Elia, not quite Joe Rogan, but like he's what you call a crusher. Like he's that guy that hits the stage. He doesn't need props. I mean, he's a talented guy. I mean, I met him. I mean, he would, when I met him, he was a comic and he was making short films. And then he had complete autonomy for his FX show, which I have never had. And I'm a, 8-time Grammy nominee, 2-time winner, 6-time Directors Guild Award nominee, so I just want you to know, the reason I just keep saying Louis is fine. He's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of guys that act that way that are actively helping to bring him back into the loop. That's what you should be worried about. There really is a group of bros that they have each other's back in a bros for bros way, in a way that the women never have. And we haven't really gotten that lesson yet.
I'm I'm reeling from all the penises you've seen. I just didn't know that.
Yeah, I know.
So but it didn't drive you out of the field when, a guy would, I mean, it's gross, but I just don't understand. Those were the mores. It may not have been, those probably weren't the mores before, the sexual revolution in the 70s and 80s. Before that, people were probably a little better.
No, but they weren't, because of the 50s. They were, I mean, my mom said when she was doing her PhD that her advisor chased her around the table. I mean, I don't think the sexual revolution I think these men, a lot of men.
I think the guys came out the winners, and we thought we were kind of being more liberated, but I think all in all, the guys became the winners, because they ended up, as usual, kind of slut-shaming us for the sexual revolution. So
Can I change the subject quickly before we lose you, Kathy? I want to hear about the Royals. We kept putting them up.
I know. And by the way,
and the Royals and the Covington boys.
No, I want to hear personal.
Okay, so first of all, here's my take on the Royals. And by the way, I am rewatching The Crown season 1.
Oh, okay.
So good.
Because, the Wallace Simpson, quote scandal, and don't mean to brag, but I was pals with the late, great, wonderful Gloria Vanderbilt. And I remember she showed me a picture of her hanging out, I think it was in Farmington, with, was he Edward when he abdicated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he married Wallace Simpson?
Wallace Simpson.
Yeah.
She hung out with Wallace and Edward.
Oh, Glo Vandy, hung out with all of them. She was just one of those where I'd go to her house and it'd be like this. The only time I'd shut up and go, you talk. And she'd go like this. I fucked hot Brando, not fat Brando. Like, she was a dream.
Oh my God.
Dream. Anyway, I think in those days, it was so aggressively worse that I do think it's good that I know you feel like we swung too far on the pendulum, and I hear you, but like we sort of themed the whole conversation, we got to go to one side of the pendulum first. And so I get it. You may not think that Louis C.K. is analogous to the guy who jumps out of the bushes, but you're right. I stayed in the business. But let me tell you, how many 59-year-old comedians can you even name that are still working, well, maybe at least infamous, but it's a grind because you're staying in the game because you love it. But I'm just telling you, like I said, I see my male contemporaries, whether they're my age or they have the same amount of experience or whatever, and the stuff that they get away with is just beyond. And so in the old days, I know for a fact it was way worse. Remember when I did my first commercial when I was, 16 or 17 or something like that. And so I've been, I was like an extra for a long time. And then I did what's called under fives, which are under 5 lines. And so I've been on sets, 20, 25 years ago where there was really, really outrageous stuff. Like there were times where even then when I didn't have the consciousness of it, and maybe all of us didn't, but there were times where you got that strong feeling, or like I said, you literally got grabbed, or in my case, I was probably mouthing off and then I just would have some guy just rip me an asshole because I had a difference of opinion and then fire me in front of everybody. Like it's just been years and decades of that. So I think we women have a lot of work to do. And one thing we should at least do is lean into this period when we, with this administration working against Time's Up and Me Too, at least philosophically, the more I think we can lean into it. I'm telling you, those guys, they stick together like dirty cops. And I say that with someone who's, I had an uncle who was a cop on the take. So
I'll just say that I want to lean into it, but I want to keep due process and the First Amendment. That's all. If we've got those. And
I hear you. Oh, that's my
point. Too many women willing to give that up. And also I've seen too many women that are just, of course we have to stop the monsters, the Harvey Weinsteins and so forth, but there's just a lot of guys that are confused as we are and nerdy. They make the wrong move and then they move in, and we've had them on this podcast, people that were just wrongly accused. And that's not the answer. The answer to male chauvinism isn't female chauvinism. It should be mutuality and mutual civility where you can still make jokes about each other.
But what about Danielle and I want to go back to the Royals?
Yeah. Can I set this up for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
As just like I'm Canadian originally, so I'm an avid longtime Royal watcher.
Thank you for taking them.
Yeah. Well,
we're in LA.
You got them.
I have them?
Yes.
And I don't want them.
Okay, so Kathy.
We kind of want them in New York.
So Kathy, you of course famously did your D-list thing.
Yes.
So Harry and Meghan, have come to Hollywood. They're in Malibu in an undisclosed location because I follow these things. And they were ready just before the outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about, comedic timing. This is bad timing. Just before the outbreak, they moved to Malibu and were about to do their whole new life. And Megan was saying, I'm only going to work with A-list directors, and we're getting away from those stuffy royals. Then this whole thing happens. They're in Malibu. The news coming out of Malibu is that they're looking at Mel Gibson's $12 million ex-house.
Which has a church on it.
He has
his own church on it. He built his own church on his property.
Right. But in England, well, that's handy for them. But in England, meanwhile, Prince Charles, the Queen, the Cambridges, they're all out doing their best to help Britain get through this pandemic. So it's looking really bad right now for them. And I just am curious because Hollywood hierarchy so well. Like, you're a kind of ex-royal. How are they going to do?
Well, it's funny. I'm gonna relate it to the Posh and Becks thing a little bit, which is for years I was hearing, obviously like they're so huge, and obviously my British friends, and it was kind of all about like, America, get ready, because when and if they ever decide to take Hollywood by storm, like, everybody else can just go home. It's game over. And it was hysterical. I mean, I cannot verify, but it appeared to me as a comedian that they moved to LA and spent a year like calling the paps, the paparazzi, and like purposely going out with like Eva Longoria to Jessica Simpson to a head of state. And I think when I would go do British talk shows during that period, they thought it was funny, but I'd be like, I don't mean to be rude. I just don't think Americans are ever like really going to get into the royals the way you guys are. Like, we kind of pick and choose, I'll be honest. Like, we
never heard of them. I mean, we heard of Queen Elizabeth, but who were they?
Do you think are Posh and Becks not famous in LA?
They're not. You know what's odd? They don't, in Los Angeles, they don't have that like, oh my God, you had a Posh and Becks sighting, or you went to the Posh and Becks party. I'm just saying, typically when you have a world-class athlete and then you have a female pop star / fashion icon, billionaires and all that stuff, and they're all doing campaigns. It was just interesting. Like, they came and they hung out and then they kind of left. And so
I think that's the thing. Like, what I fear for them is that they gave up the thing that makes them interesting to Americans, which is, hey, can we come hang out in a castle when we visit England? And like their friends, the Clooneys, right? Like, we're in our Sussex mansion or whatever it is. We'll come and borrow sugar from your Sussex mansion and that will be cool. But in LA, it's like that it's got its own royalty and pecking order. And this idea that Meghan was Hollywood royalty, the way Grace Kelly was Hollywood royalty. I actually thought they were still living in Canada, so sorry about that. I obviously very COVIDed. Well, this just shows how the trouble they're going to have, Kathy, is to your point.
Well, I think the racism was worse than I thought because I didn't participate in it. So when I heard the rumblings that it was so severe, and then, as I am a darling of the right wing, Molly knows this well, they all know her name too, you kind of stumble upon those comments when you're reading the own, like, as they say, the hellscape that is, social media. So I do understand that part. I do kind of think it's cool that Harry went from being like a cute twink that all the gays were talking about to now he seems sort of like a grown-up, like responsible dude. So that's different. Just, the gay boys still like him better than Will. But I also, I'm actually interested to see what they do here, because you're right. And also, especially, frankly, in light of this pandemic, when there may be an entire global paradigm shift, it'll be interesting to see sort of when we come out of this, if people even care about stuff like that anymore, or if they care more because they want to aspire to it, or you're right. What role are they going to play? Do they care? Do we care? But I would say most people that I sort of chat with think it's kind of cool that they got out of there. Like, I love Elizabeth. I can't help it. I'm a gay man. I love, I love the sort of pomp and circumstance and stuff. But she was pretty brutal on the way out. Like, she kind of went Lady Di on the way out. You know what I mean? I'm one of those that thinks Diana should have kept her princess title. So I'm one of those.
Yeah.
So
I have a question.
Yes.
What you just said about you being a gay man. So how do I put this politely and so we don't get canceled on Twitter? I have spent my life, and I can't find any other word for it, but I am, and I acknowledge it, a fag hag. Isn't there a better word?
Girl.
Yeah. They love me, I love them, and it started in second grade with Billy Burgess. Billy, if you're out there, we always understood one another.
Billy.
But my question is, isn't there a better word now for fag?
Yeah, the gays like fruit fly, but but I do a bit in my movie where I say, I've been in this fight in this game and canvassing and an ally for so long that frankly I will not give up the title of hag. So I do not need to use the F word, but I say, and the audience always applauds, look, you young gays, I've done too much knocking on doors, too much protesting. I am bigger than a fruit fly. I'm a hag, damn it. I've earned that title. And so
I think you're right.
Right? And they laugh because they're like, okay, she didn't say the bad F word, and she owns being a hag, and I think it should have some dignity, damn it.
Well, can I ask, what is the quality? Because some women, like, I feel I will never be a fruit fly. And I say that resentfully because I don't know what is the quality that makes, like, you and Christina, I'll use fruit fly. But what is it? Like, what is it that makes you the icon? Like, there's a quality, like Liza Minnelli,
seriously,
and not someone else,
It is nothing more than chemistry. I firmly believe, because I also, in first grade, somehow took to the quiet boy who never found the right girl. I also literally officiated the wedding of my high school boyfriend to his lover. So, I've really gone full hag, honey. I have got all caps, emojis, full hag. But I think it really is chemistry. And when I say that, I think that you'll find with women that do have a lot of gay friends, whether they're LGBT, fluid, whatever, to me, it's a sense of feeling like no matter what, you're always a little bit of an outsider looking in, or maybe you feel like a lot of an outsider looking in. But I think that's kind of the connection. So I think, for example, Joan Rivers and I, I'm looking at your picture, Joan Rivers and I would talk about this a lot. And I would say, I remember the first time we really sat down to talk shop together, like a really, like, not just small talk, but like, and then that's all we talked about. But I would just say, like, as a joke, I'd say, how are you doing with the gay audiences? Like, just, because I knew it would get, and she'd go, oh, come on. And I knew what that meant. Like, and so we used to have this joke. We would say we love gay audiences because they're unshockable. What are you going to say to, like, a 55-year-old gay guy, or frankly, a 20-year-old gay kid who's on Grindr? What am I going to say that's going to shock them? So right. That's, as an artist and stuff, I think there's that sort of sense of connection already. So to maybe somewhat disenfranchised types of people feeling like if we get together, we feel that kind of community. So I think that, obviously it's...
And add to that good taste and brilliance.
Well, that's the thing.
Tell us about Bobby from Sarasota. And
he's a legend, first of all.
He's a legend.
So what happened?
He wrote you a letter, and what he said about your host New Year's Eve. Just tell a story, because I love it.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but in the film, which you can get on Amazon Prime or Apple or anywhere downloadable except Netflix, in my film, I read the whole letter. I read it word for word because sometimes I think comedy, you actually can get away with certain things if you're letting the audience know, like, I am quoting this person. So this is a guy who is a fan, and somehow this letter, like, made it to my desk, and it was an old-timey letter, not an email. And it was just a vicious, but in a gay way, which means vicious but fabulous, takedown of, Anderson Cooper. Right. And it was so vicious, and I talk about this in the film, that it was so over the top that I, like, involuntarily was bursting out laughing, even though it was, like, had bad language and words we don't use anymore, just that he just dove in and
it was gay to gay, like, as a gay man, Anderson, you've let down the team kind of thing. But
you never betray
that you never let your hag down. And he said something like, you never let your hag down, or you always stick by your hag, or something like that. And so that's when I get into yes, I would like to retain hag status, and all the younger girls can be fruit flies.
Kathy, I know we're keeping you for your time. Do you have a couple of minutes to remain just to answer a couple of questions that came in for you from our subscribers at Patreon?
Can Molly be my phone a friend?
Yes, I'll answer the question.
Wait, can I ask one question about the Covington?
No, Christina.
I know. My followers are like,
no, Christina, I'm going to end this here because I don't want to lose
I've been silenced. You're silencing a woman.
Yes.
Silencing a fruit fly.
First of all, for the main podcast, I want to thank Kathy so much and Molly for being here. And then we're going to, if you guys who are not subscribers are going to miss questions for Kathy. And boy, they are incredible. They go beyond the Covington boys. Can I just say?
No, I'm going to bring up the Covington boys.
No.
Not for anybody that doesn't follow us on Patreon.
Oh my God!
I'm going to end this here, and then just stay on, ladies, for a second. And Kathy, we're so grateful to you. Thank you. I'm just hoping you have nothing better to do at this moment. But
I have loved this. This has been the closest thing to a hug I've had in a while.
Well, Christina, remember you were talking about trying to diet and be healthy while we're all in quarantine?
Yes.
Well, I'm very excited. We have a new sponsor called Sakara, which is basically going to send you healthy and nutritious meals to your home.
What perfect timing.
I know. And especially right now that grocery stores, I mean, if you go into them at all, they're picked over, or if you're trying to order, from grocery food delivery services, that's become difficult. But
it's all difficult, and they're going to, bring fresh, delicious meals straight to our doors. Sakara is a godsend right now.
Right. And it's a nutrition company that believes wellness begins with what you eat.
And their signature nutrition program brings this transformational power of plant nutrition to your home in the form of fresh, plant-rich, ready-to-eat meals. They're made with organic ingredients, powerful superfoods. Each meal is expertly designed to build your immune system, which we need, improve energy, support gut health and digestion, and keep your skin glowing.
From hearty salads and nutrient-dense granolas to savory flatbreads and seasonal fruit parfaits, their ever-changing menu of creative, chef-crafted meals makes clean eating delicious.
And all of their meals are 100% plant-based, gluten-free, dairy-free, and non-GMO.
And in addition to their delicious meals, Sakara also offers daily essentials like supplements and herbal teas to complete your wellness routine and support overall health and vitality. To boost immunity, as you say, which we need right now, try their best-selling daily probiotic blend of detox water drops with pure chlorophyll.
And right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off their order. All you have to do is go to sakara.com/femsplain or enter the code femsplain at checkout.
That's Sakara, SAKARA.com/femsplain to get 20% off your order.
Sakara.com/femsplain.
Well, that was a lot of fun. It was very exciting to have Kathy Griffin on, and Molly is always great fun. I feel like we only got to talk about half of the things we actually wanted to talk about with her. I'm sorry you didn't get Covington in there.
Well, I would like to ask her because, first of all, I was a little starstruck. I've always thought she was enormously, hysterically funny. She's very smart, and comedians are smart. I mean, it takes, I think,
but she is, yeah.
They're great comedians. I mean, they have to be so quick, and just the mental agility to make connections that are so funny. But anyway, I wanted to ask her about Covington because she was hit so hard, and now she's had time to think about what happened to her, and this effort to annihilate her, excommunicate her, destroy her. And I was just hoping to talk about the coming because she had played a part
Yeah,
in
explain what
rushing to
happened.
judgment.
Right.
Well,
Because
that was the case.
Use this past week. In fact, it was very relevant.
Right, because they sued her. Well, they sued a lot of people.
Well, the Covington boys were those boys who were, especially one boy in particular, was filmed Catholic high school, filmed on Capitol Hill. What last year's March for Life, and they were seemingly mocking a Native American man, and then it went viral, and they got a lot of abuse, and then it turns out, as so often these things on the internet are, it was taken out of context. And then they sued the media, many like CNN and NBC, and they also sued Kathy because she had texted that they should be
doxxed.
Kind of doxxed. Yeah, what did she say? We want their names and things like that. And then
I mean, what she might not have known, or maybe she did, I don't know, but what she might not have known is that people were threatening their lives. People, well-known people in the media were saying they should be punched. They had punchable faces.
Yeah.
These were 15-year-old kids who had done, it turned out, done nothing. They were preyed upon by this other group. I forget, they were called the Israelites or something, and they were casting aspersions on the boys. And then this so-called veteran who's playing drums, a Native American, apparently isn't what he claimed he was.
It was a big misunderstanding.
Big misunderstanding, but people rushed to judgment, and these boys faced just a hate storm, relentless hate storm and threats and so forth. And so I just wanted to know how she felt about it.
Right, but the relevant factor, the newsworthy factor, was that the case was not thrown out. The judge ruled that she couldn't, that it had no jurisdiction, not that she was guilty of whatever the charge for doxing in this context is, but that it, being in LA, it wasn't in their jurisdiction. So anyway, that whether they'll drop the suit, which seems likely, but you spoke to her. I thought what was really interesting, and honestly sort of answered it, was her views about Louis C.K. And I actually was I was thinking about it. I was quite sympathetic to what she said, because I suspect that comedy world and what she was describing about the guys and their penises, I'm not surprised if it's that bad for women. And you know, and if it's true that these women were discouraged from comedy by the way they were treated by Louis C.K. I mean, look, I think if he's got a market and people want to hear him, I don't think anyone should be censored for life like that. But I can understand the anger towards him and why she feels the way she does about it.
Yeah, I can't. The only thing I'd say is that it's a world where people, you know, are wild. I mean, they're saying crazy things to each other. It's just, I've heard about it. I mean, they go from town to town. They work these clubs. It's late night. There's drinking. There's drugs. There's carrying on, and it's just, you know, one of the ways they communicate is by put downs. Comedians just love to, especially, and men do this, but I'm sure the female comedians hold their own, putting each other down, all that, and then just crazy behavior. He was part of that, and it was disgusting. But he claims that he'd asked permission, and it was a horrible, stupid situation. But was it a situation where someone should be, you know, just expunged from civilized society forever, or from, you know, comedic society forever? That's what I was questioning.
I think he has tried to come back, and it's not just the Kathy, you know, Griffins. It's people have objected to him coming back. I mean, I think didn't he do a very early comedy set, just, I don't know, months after this whole thing happened, and he said I mean, maybe like me, he just kind of stepped in it again. He was very defiant and said some more things. I mean, it's all sort of fading in my memory, but
Well, I think people should apologize in things like this. Like Kathy Griffin did apologize for the photo she posted on Twitter. And I also think that apologies, people should be allowed to apologize for something, for a big mistake. And
that was the other thing I really feel I would have loved to have talked to her about is that she knew Trump way, way, way back. She was on Celebrity Apprentice. She knew him, I think, even before she was on that. And I would have loved to have heard her opinion of Trump then and now, like going from being on his show to holding his head aloft.
Journey.
That would have been interesting. But if we're lucky, we'll have her back on. And it was great to have Molly. Molly, I just found out, is starting a podcast for the Daily Beast with Rick Wilson called The New Abnormal. And it's going to be political, and they're talking about, COVID related stuff. And so I'll look.
They're both great. She's so fun to listen to.
Yeah.
On any topic. So we need more Molly.
We need more Molly. Anyway, so we're going to host next week for our viewers at Glow Think. Anyway, those who support us will be able to ask Dave Rubin questions for our special bonus episode. And we really would appreciate anyone who loves this podcast to even just pledge $1 a month, $5 a month. It would be wonderful. And you get all our bonus content and our monthly newsletter.
And review us on iTunes and other places. Just put 5 stars. Anything that would help.
Everything helps, but your support especially. Anyway, well, that wraps up for this week. We'll look forward to talking to Dave Rubin next week, and more COVID cocktails, I guess, more quarantinis.
Quarantinis.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for listening to the Femsplainers. Keep up with us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. Send questions and comments to contact@femsplainers.com.
A big thanks to Ella Ryder, our research and in-studio production assistant, and to Nat Frum, our audio and video editor. And we're proud to be part of the Ricochet Network and grateful to the American Enterprise Institute for allowing us to record in its studio every week in downtown Washington, D.C.
And miss something? You'll find everything you need at our homepage, femsplainers.com, including links to past episodes, our sponsors, where you can sign up to support us, and even to merch. And please don't forget to like us or give us 5 stars on iTunes.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.